right, well, it is 3 o'clock, so I think we can go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Jeff Ladolter, and I'm with the National American Indian and Alaska Native Addiction Technology Transfer Center. I'm just going to say a few things about today's webinar, and then I'll pass it over to the real experts. Our center is supported by a grant from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Association. And content of the webinar does not necessarily reflect their views. We do provide continuing education units. If you're interested in obtaining a CEU from this webinar, you can just email cph-nativecenter@uiowa.edu, and I just added the email to the chat. At the end, we'll ask everyone to complete a brief survey, a GIPR survey. And if you have any questions, you can add them to the chat, and we'll address them when the presenter's like. So with that out of the way, I'm going to hand it over to Shirley Kane.
Oh my goodness, Jeff. Good day, everybody, and welcome to our webinar, Better Together. And I just want to talk a little bit before I start the prayer. I'm just like I feel so lucky that we are, in fact, are better together. And, you know, it's like the old concept of, you know, coming together as villagers and working together, you know, as villagers and as community and as clans people. We do so much better as communities than we are alone. And I think throughout this COVID, it's given us a great opportunity to be alone, but yet be together virtually. So although virtual is not nearly as good as in person, it's better than, you know, not getting together at all. So I'm really grateful to have this opportunity. Also, just want to remind everybody too that there's some awesome tools on the University of Iowa website that we've all worked at putting together, and I'm like so proud of those tools. So Jeff, at some point, if you could give them the link for that too, I think that would be, yep, there it goes. So it's really some wonderful tools that we've worked so hard to put together, and I'm just like so proud of the team that has done this work. And anyway, miigwech. Gishimani do mashkasi kwa ishini kazo mikisito dem. Miskagamiwi zaga ganang and dunjaba. I want to say special prayers, Gishimani do, for all of our families and our grandfamilies and our relatives who are helping other people in any way. Miigwech to all the people who do services, including our program and University of Iowa and the Yurok team, and all the other teams that do awesome work for our people and our communities and our clans. And miigwech for all the ones that are loving so much and giving so much. And special prayers for our Namama Ki, our Mother Earth, and all that she gives to sustain us. And special prayers for the ones who are addicted and who have mental health issues. Special prayers for those ones, and that we can continue to love them and still help them in the way that we can, and continue to practice our harm reduction from a good place. And miigwech for our good water, and prayers for our continued good water. And special prayers too for all those people that are involved in that George Floyd case today, and for this coming week and for the weeks. And prayers for those witnesses and those ones that were like so in fear at that time, and prayers for the family of George Floyd. And miigwech for all of our good people who want to help, and to help with diversity and equity and inclusion. And miigwech for all the goodness you bring into our lives, and miigwech for the sustenance and for the maintenance and for the love and the blessings. Oh, and then away magana. Miigwech. Okay.
Okay, so Jeff, I should take it away, huh?
Oh, yep, whenever you're ready.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. My name is Pam Baston, and I'm with JBS International, and I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. Today's webinar was developed in a team effort, and Shirley Kane had a great role in this. And what we like to do when we present something in terms of a subject matter expert area, in this case, housing, we like to have multiple perspectives and also make sure that one of the presenters at a minimum is a grantee working in this space in the area of working with individuals that have opioid use disorder, stimulant use disorder, or other substance use disorders that in this case would make a good case for having housing. So I just want to tell you real briefly that the program that I'm going to be covering first is a program that was already up and running and implemented for many years, about 12 years. We put ourselves out of business by taking a multi-generational approach. We're very proud of that, and I'll talk more about that as we go. But what happened is the housing authority in Key West had lots of trouble in public housing with people that had substance use disorders, and they would refer them to the local community mental health center and substance use center. And what would happen is if you happen to be brown, Black, or Indigenous, suddenly when you showed up to get help for a substance abuse problem or mental health problem, you would be told, "Oh, we're sorry, all our charity slots are gone. We don't have any room. Come back in July and we'll see if we can squeeze you in." And so the housing authority got so tired of what they saw to be discriminatory practices that they said, we're just going to start our own housing program that will include drug treatment and mental health treatment. And we're going to do it ourselves because we can't rely on the local program. So they started a program that I'll be talking about, and I helped them write a grant for it. And we got $1.2 million each year for 5 years. We actually got a 6th year later. And once we wrote the grant, they started hiring staff and nobody would stay. These are not easy programs to run. And they burned through 3 or 4 staff in a year, and we're going to have to give the grant back. And they asked me as the grant writer, would I run the program? And I said to them, you know, I'm not brown, Black, or Indigenous, and I've never lived in public housing, and I have not had a substance use disorder. And I always feel like the person who runs such a program should have better aligned experience. And so I first turned it down. And then when they were going to give the grant back, I said, okay, if you move me into public housing where I can at least learn what it's like to be poor, you know, and I learned all of this sitting on the stoop of my apartment, my public housing apartment. I moved in with my young son, who was 10 at the time. I could write a book about that. He was very spoiled at the time, and we lived in a beautiful home on a lake in Tallahassee, Florida. I worked for the governor in Florida. I used to head up the publicly funded drug treatment system. And he was very spoiled. And I would always tell him, if you keep acting spoiled, I'm going to move you into public housing so you can understand what it's like to not have all these luxuries. And he didn't believe me. So the day I moved him in, he said, oh, I'll never be bad again. Please don't do this to me. But it was the best experience he ever had in his life, because he got to learn a lot about how the real world works. And he learned a lot about discrimination. And he learned a lot of lessons about the importance of families and of trying to help people in the early stages of problem development, because he became friends with all the children that were there for drug treatment. So I moved in, lived there almost 6 months with him. And I threw out everything I learned in college, everything in graduate school, everything I learned through my certification of addiction, threw it out the window, because I realized that most of the things I had learned had absolutely nothing to do with the real world as I experienced it living in public housing. And if any of you have lived in public housing, or at least the public housing in the lower 48, there's no luxuries. When I say you don't even have, now I know it's different now, but these apartments were built back in the 60s, and you weren't even allowed to have counter space. That was considered a luxury. So all of the cooking we had to prepare in the sink, which is not at all hygienic or anything like that. We weren't allowed to have doors on closets, so anything you had in a closet would come pouring out. It was a very stressful situation. So what happened is the Public Housing Authority created, I stepped in and took over this program called Safeport. And as you can see here, there's a sign that leads you to this campus. We used existing public housing apartments. We fenced them all off. And the people that live there that had to have a substance use disorder, and they had to, as a priority, have child welfare involvement in order to be eligible for this program. And what actually happened is the housing authority emptied some of the existing public housing apartments, put in the substance using families, relocated the non-substance using families. And that's how we created this kind of dedicated campus of public housing. That way, families could live in their own apartments. They weren't thrown up on bunk beds. They got to have their entire family with them. They didn't have to choose between their recovery and their children. Most family-based programs only allow infants, toddlers, or children up to age 10. Many of them allow you to only take 2 children at a time. And we said, no, we're going to make this about what our families really look like. And our families had multiple children, and usually multiple fathers, often multiple races. And so we configured our program around who needed our services. We didn't put any arbitrary requirements in. And that's why this model was so successful. So what we did is, and if you came to this campus, these are just your standard apartments, but again, all fenced off. We had beautiful gazebos and barbecue pits and picnic tables. And if you showed up on any given day, you know, those little blow up pools that people have, the little wading pools, there would be children running in and out of sprinklers and hopping in the little swimming pools, and families sitting on their front porch stoop sipping lemonade, literally. And this is how treatment should be. It was not a, isolating kind of, pluck the parents out and give them treatment and put the kids somewhere else. We kept the entire families together. So this became a nationally recognized program. We did ask for the University of Miami School of Medicine to be our evaluator. We told them, evaluate everything. We don't care how good or bad it looks. Don't change it. Don't sugarcoat it. We want this to be the best in the country, and we'll make whatever changes need to be made for this to be good. And we ended up with the highest success rate in the country, even years out after graduation. I want to say we had was 82 or 87% of all the families that went through this program up to 5 years later were still in successful recovery, hadn't been rearrested, their kids hadn't gone back to child welfare, and they had employment and were self-sufficient. So this was the model, and we provided something for every family member. So if you came in, we admitted the family as they identified. We did have gay, lesbian families, two-spirited families that came in. We had mothers with their grandparents. We had every imaginable configuration. We had single men with their children. We had married, unmarried, however that family identified, that's who we served. I said our population of focus was individuals with substance use disorder that were either already living in or were otherwise eligible for public housing. Pretty much everybody in the publicly funded drug treatment system is eligible for public housing, so that was not difficult. And their kids and all their partners could come as long as the partners were safe. So if they were domestic violence perpetrators, they could not come in until they completed a perpetration course by our local domestic violence shelter, because we needed this campus to be totally safe. Also, you need to know that the clients that we had there were basically the clients that our typical drug and mental health system did not welcome, did not serve well. Our outreach for this model started at 6 a.m. Back then we had a big problem with crack cocaine. We started to have a problem with meth. We went out to the dope houses. Our outreach staff went out at 6 a.m. They would find primarily the women left alone after they had transacted, 6-8 sex partners all night long for drugs. They were hungry, they were tired, they wanted a shower. And we would pick them up, we would take them to McDonald's, we would feed them, we would talk to them, and then we would bring them to the program, show that to them and say, if you would like to make a change, this is what we would like to offer you. We would like to put you into this program. And I don't know that we had a single person turn us down ever in 12 years. It was a question of, they might not have come in that day. It might've been a week later, a month later, but I don't remember anybody saying no, because when you step foot on this campus, you literally feel the connection that people had with each other, with the staff. And it was a very loving, nurturing, non-judgmental place to be. So about 90% of our families had child welfare involvement. That was our priority because, again, we were trying to hit multiple generations. And a lot was at stake because a lot of these kids were being yanked out of their homes. Sometimes they were going into homes that were no safer than the ones they came from. And so we even talked the child welfare system into letting us, have essentially, we were like given the custody, I forget the term they used, of those children while they were in treatment. So as long as they lived on that campus, even if they were going to sever parental ties or move the children out, they allowed them to stay until they saw if this could work. We had very few exclusionary criteria. If you were suicidal, we could not accept you because this is not a program with everybody under one roof and where we had medical staff 24/7 and where we were able to walk around and see people all the time. You were essentially in your own apartment with the door closed. So for safety, we could not have anybody who was actively suicidal. We did not have perpetrators of domestic violence, again, unless they first completed the course. And many did. Many came in. We said, I'm sorry, if you go to this course and you complete, we'll let you in. And we did after that. We did not exclude felonies by themselves. I know that's an issue in some public housing. We may have even broken rules. I don't know, but we did not make a felony because think about all the people that have drug use disorders. Many of them have felonies. And so, and we know people of color, especially then, but including now, are more likely to be arrested and put through the system and charged in higher ways of charging, like felonies, than individuals who are Caucasian. So we did not make that alone. The one thing that I would say here is that if you are serving stimulant users, primarily meth, people with meth use disorders, because that increases the sensitivity and heightened sexual drive, that you may need to really look at sexual perpetrators as a group you might exclude or get some type of treatment first before you would consider them for admission. Our daily schedule was amazing. We started with a morning meditation that was all participant led. So every participant, and we had up to 100 people on the campus at any given time. That did include the children. So probably about 40 or 50 parents at any given time. The rest were children. And the parents would take turns going around. We did split groups by gender, except for when we did couples counseling, we obviously brought them together. But we had this morning meditation. And what was really cool about that is we were a very multicultural program. And if you've ever been to Key West, Florida, where this was run, we had, I think, 136 languages spoken in Key West at that time. We had a very vibrant multicultural community. So the meditations were often very different spiritual practices and things. And so we all got to learn different practices, and that was amazing. And the person could say a prayer, they could make some kind of inspirational presentation, whatever they wanted to do. So we always started our day in this very kind of calming, intensive, inclusive way. And then we did exercise right away, which was either yoga, beach walks. All of our multicultural music is what we had playing during, if we did dance, anything to get exercise, because these individuals that we worked with had not taken very good care of themselves. So we were very big about taking good care and modeling that. And our staff participated in all of this. Everybody did exercise. Everybody participated in morning meditation. We made our daily schedule, unlike a lot of drug treatment programs where all they do is talk about drugs. We understood that the root of the drug problem is not the drugs. The root of the problem is trauma and is, sexual abuse and poverty and generational transmission and environmental exposure and in utero exposure and all these other things. These are very complex disorders. So we looked at the whole person. And so we would teach, for example, when we taught cooking classes, we didn't just teach a cooking class, we included a grocery store trip. We taught people how to fill out a grocery list, how to prioritize your grocery list to your budget. So you made sure you prioritize the most important things. You couldn't get on the van to go to the grocery store unless you had a grocery list. So we were teaching basic life skills in everything we did. We had relationship classes. That was probably the single most important class we had, even more so than the drug specific treatment, because what we saw was how disconnected people were and how unhealthy the relationships were with partners, with their families, with each other, with their children. That was a huge, huge emphasis. We had parenting classes, we had 12-step addiction groups, we had budgeting and life skills, we had job skills, we helped them get jobs, we helped them write resumes, we practiced and role-played job interviewing, we piled them all up in the van and went to the Goodwill and worked out a deal with the Goodwill to give all of our clients a wardrobe at no cost so that they could dress up. We had our clients wearing halter tops to job interviews. That's how we learned what we needed to provide. Didn't come out of a book or a manual. It came out of understanding in detail the population that we were working with. We provided literacy. We had many, many clients that could not read or write at the literacy level. And our other huge, huge, huge area of emphasis was health, including sexual health. One of the things we were not prepared for, and if you've ever worked with me in training, you know that I do not mince words, and sometimes I get myself in trouble, but to be very direct with you, when you are primarily a woman, most of our clients were women, though we did have the male partners or female partners, and you spend, you're tricking 6-8 men a day, you're face down in some nasty mattress in a dope house, and you come out of that and you get a chance at treatment. When the fog clears and you're in recovery and you start thinking about all those things that you did that happened to you, the abuse, the humiliation, the things that you did or didn't do for your children, that is so heavy and so overwhelming that we had to provide. That's why a lot of these hostile programs are not effective, the real highly confrontational programs, because these folks we found needed a lot of love, nurturing, and support and forgiveness, and to forgive themselves to be able to move forward. And they didn't even know what sexual healthy behavior looked like. So by the way, we use the free, it's hard to find good sexual health curriculum. We use the Texas Christian University sexuality class for women. We did modify it a little bit, but that was one that we highly recommend, and it's free, and you can just download it off the internet. So
Before
here's what
go on, Pam. Oh, I just see one question from the chat. Yep. That asks, where were the classes and childcare facilities located if the main campus was?
Good question. Okay, so we took a couple apartments offline. That was the only cost of the program, was taking a couple apartments offline and converting them into counseling rooms. And we converted one 3-bedroom apartment into a daycare center. Now the daycare center, we made enough money off of through subsidies like TANF, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, that actually made money, if you can believe that, that we then poured back into the program. But the only cost of this program was the cost of taking the one, actually I think it might have been 2 housing apartments offline to create the counseling offices. And the issue with that is that because these were apartments and not run under one roof, we were able to bill Medicaid. We billed Medicaid for every life skills class. We billed Medicaid for all the other services. So this was no more expensive than an outpatient program would be. Actually, probably less expensive. You would have to pay rent to have an outpatient facility. And here we took a couple units offline to create the outpatient offices. But this was licensed as an outpatient program, but had the look, feel, and cohesiveness and nurturing therapeutic milieu of a residential program. And that's what these families needed. So thank you for that question. I will tell you the child care center is not for the not brave of heart. I mean, it is a hard program to run, the child care on site, but I would not have changed a thing. That's how we learn what was really going on with the children, is the kids would be asleep, you know, when they shouldn't be sleeping, or they would come to school and with like a little can of SpaghettiOs every day. So we would talk to the parents about, you know, sending SpaghettiOs and a plastic spoon is probably not the best lunch. Let's talk about some variety. Well, then the next day they would come with what are the little pastas, little square pastas. It was just a different shape of pasta. You know, it was a ravioli. And we'd say, okay, we need to do a whole class on appropriate lunches for kids that are healthy, that won't be high in carbs, that they won't fall asleep, you know. Sometimes kids would say things or do things that you knew they were observing destructive behaviors in the home. So having those kids on site, best thing we ever did, hardest that, because it's hard to keep daycare staff. They turn over like crazy. They don't get paid well. They come and go, and keeping the ratios you have to have in childcare is not easy, but it was probably the best thing that we did. Here's one of the last couple slides I have here on Safeport. You can see, if you look at the blue slot, the blue bar, those are where moms brought their kids with them to treatment, and the red is when they didn't. So you can see that the difference in completion, if you could bring your children with you to care, your completion rate was much higher. And not only was it higher, if you brought them to care, it was higher after we did the follow-up 3 to 5 years. As long as we could follow people up to 5 years, they were still drug-free and in recovery, successful recovery, if they had their kids in treatment with them. So cannot emphasize enough how important it is to be able to include the whole families and to do 2 and 3 generation interventions. We did get our results published. Highly, highly recommend, if you have the opportunity to work with a good evaluator and get the results published. I will say we made a major mistake. We made a million mistakes, by the way, running this program, because we were pioneering new ground. Nobody back in 96 was doing programming like this. This is when we did this. And this went on for many years, but we made a big mistake. We should have included the federal project officer's name on the evaluation report that we got published, because that would have gotten a lot more buy-in from the feds who funded this. And we did have SAMHSA fund our initial project. We got an extra year. They then funded it under homeless. So we literally converted a mother and kids residential funding source to homeless, because they all would have been homeless if we closed the door. So we had some very creative ways to get this going. And I'm just going to spend 2 more minutes and then turn it over to just let you know there were several other ways to do these innovative housing models. I'm going to share 2 that I was involved, or 1 that I was involved in. Lighthouse in the Sierras, that was in Nevada. They came to meet with us about how we did our Safeport program, which was like a port in the storm, Safeport, and they did Lighthouse in the Sierra Mountains. They used log cabins and they created something similar. But the most interesting one is this one called Millennium Center. And you can see in the photo, all of these are prefab buildings. So we got Department of Agriculture funding. It was a low cost interest loan. The loan could only go to public housing. We met with the public housing in the middle of nowhere, Rutherford County, I think it is, Georgia. They found 16 acres of pine forest. They bought it very cheaply. It was literally in the middle of nowhere. And I stayed, just so you know, I stayed at a motel, not a hotel, when I went to help get this program started. And when I asked what the amenities were, and I meant like internet, they said wall-to-wall carpet and an in-room phone. So that's how rural this was. And I've lived in rural towns almost my whole life, but this was the most rural I've ever been in. Anyway, one day it's a little pine forest, and then all of these programs, these houses were built in a factory. They were prefab, and they were all duplexes where you could open the door for a large family, would take up the whole house. If it was if smaller families, we'd lock the door and serve 2 at a time. We had to be very flexible. This is the beautiful Millennium Center. These are all the things that we had funded through the Department of Agriculture low interest loan. And then the residents paid rent, and that was subsidized usually by TANA for other economic assistance. We had a state-of-the-art childcare center, unbelievable. It had the one-way windows, much better than the one I ran at Safeport, because we learned a lot more after this one. And the only thing I'll mention here is we had to put the housing, we had to put the the childcare center outside of our fence because it had to be open to the general public in order to be eligible for whatever funding we use. So there's some maneuvering you have to do sometimes. Some things have to be open to the public, some don't. We did have fences around both programs, Millennium and Safeport, not to keep the clients in, but to keep the Johns, because most of all the women we work with were trading sex for drugs. And those pimps and Johns did not want these women who were turning 6-8 tricks a night off the street. They wanted them in there doing their work for them. So we did, for their own safety, have to keep them separate with the fence. I'm not gonna, these are the questions after this. If you have any quick questions, we'll go now, because we are gonna have a Q&A at the end. So if you have a burning question specific to these models, you can ask now. Otherwise, what we'll have some time at the end, and you can be thinking about sharing any experiences you had creating housing models and any other assistance you might want to have from this. And so now what I would like to do, and Jeff, as I'm transitioning to the next slide for Shirley.
Hang on, Pam.
Yeah.
I think somebody had a question about wanting to know what about the curriculum.
Okay.
I think it was the Texas
one. My goodness. If you go to Texas Christian University, and by the way, none of the evidence-based practices are religious. It just happened to be developed by that. But if you Google Texas Christian University, IBR, I stands for, I think it's Integrated Behavioral Research, B as in boy, R. You will pull up a treasure trove of free evidence-based curricula. And all they ask you to do is give them, like let people know, have them keep their name on it. But we adapted everything we use there. And you will have to do the same probably for some of these. Many of their curriculas are for correctional programs. And almost all of them were on SAMHSA's National Registry for Effective Programs and Practices, NREP. So they are considered evidence-based. That we didn't have any money to really go out and buy all these fancy schmancy programs. So we used primarily free. I will tell you one quick lesson we learned, again, big mistake we made. We knew that to correct the problems in the generation and help the younger generation so they wouldn't follow in their parents' footsteps, that we had to do a very intensive amount of work with all the children. So we did a lot of like date rape. We did a lot of sex ed for the teens, because we had all ages. We did, unfortunately, I hate to say this, we did not understand how many babies had been sexually abused. So we had not initially screened the babies and toddlers for sexual abuse. When we did, we had over 80% of the babies and toddlers were sexually abused. We wish we had done that physical screening earlier. And we thought maybe even that child welfare would, but they hadn't. And how we knew it was a problem was a little child was hanging onto the fence, and he was African-American, but his knuckles were like white. He had squeezed so hard. And I went and tried to help get his hands off this gate, off the fence. And I asked him, why he was doing this. And I was trying to help him. And he said, will this mean the bad men can't come get me anymore? And he was maybe 3.5 or 4. And we said, oh my, like we thought more of sexual abuse of the teen girls and maybe the teen boys. We hadn't thought about this young age. And boy, we were not prepared for that. The other mistake we made was that, what was the other one? And I lived there. It's the only reason I knew this didn't work. We ran a in-the-box parenting program, one of the ones you get off the shelf. It was not evidence-based, I don't think, at the time. But I lived there, and I'm saying, oh my gosh, these parents are not getting any better. They were 100% passing the pre-test, 100% passing the post-test. They were not improving their parenting skills at all. And so we know data tells you something happens, but not why. We learned that the reason when we did focus groups, university came in and did focus groups, it was because the parenting classes were too abstract. And they said, what's the one missing ingredient that we did not have in our book-led parenting classes? And it was having kids. So we realized this is too abstract. You got to teach parenting with real life children the best way. So then we learned the parents can't teach parenting with their own children that's too awkward because they might not have felt naturally at taking, you know, responsibility. So we had them practice with each other's children. What a difference that made. The parenting just was off the charts. It was so good once the parents had a chance to work with each other's children and learn the skills and practice the skills all at once rather than just the book knowledge. So I'm going to now open, Shirley, your slide. But that was another kind of real eye opener for us, was really needing to look at the practical nature of what we were offering. So I'm going to pass this on to Shirley. I'll stick around and for questions later. And I did not know it was going to do this weaving in stuff, Shirley. Sorry, getting me dizzy.
Okay.
So take it away, Shirley, for your.
Well, good afternoon again. Thank you, Pam. What's that, Jeff?
Just one more question from the chat. They asked, did you assist the ladies with finding employment by the time they completed the program?
Yes. So once you completed the program, you got a Section 8 voucher to go out and get your own housing. Was that the question?
No, it's jobs.
Jobs. Oh no. We got them jobs. They had to have jobs to stay in public housing because this program lasted about a year. So and what would happen is all of the women were coming back getting jobs as housekeepers. And so finally after 4 or 5 in a row, I came back and said, wait a minute, why is everybody coming back with a housekeeping job? Granted, we were living in Key West and there was a lot of hotels and all, but they were being told that's what happens if you're brown or black, you get or indigenous, you get a housekeeping job. They were being told that literally by our job skills program. So I marched my butt right over there and had a real heart-to-heart with the gentleman who was running the job skills training program that we had been referring to, and asked him, I fully expected him to deny it, but I reported what the clients were telling me. And he said, no, you're damn right. I told him that. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? And he said, our job skills program was supposed to be for white men that come back from war and have disabilities for serving our country and and not for these drug addicts. And he went on and on. Well, we ended up exposing him for his racist behaviors. Unfortunately, he didn't lose his job, but we ended up bringing in-house all the job training because we just couldn't, it was too much to risk that these, prejudices and discriminations would continue. So we went out and how we sold our job program is we would tell the job folks, you hire someone off the street, there's a chance they might be a substance user. You hire one of our clients, we do drug testing every week. We have all kinds of support. We have all kinds of skills, and they learned and the word got out really quick. You want a good workforce? Hire Safeport clients. It went from begging people to take our clients to, we had them really requesting, calling, who do you have? I need somebody in construction. And we taught entrepreneurship. We had 2 clients when I was there start their own business. They were making more money than every one of us that worked there. By the time one started a landscaping company, one started a cookie bakery, some kind of bakery. Another one did when you bring food to people and you go out, I forget what that's called. But yeah, we took a very hopeful, optimistic, you can do anything you want. We did a lot of reframing and a lot of helping them envision themselves as a successful person. So thank you for that question. Okay, Shirley.
Okay, we have next coming up the Yurok Tribe Wellness Coalition. And part of the coalition, they actually have a large constituency, a large group that collaborate together. It's comprised of primarily Yurok tribal folks or people working for the tribe. And it also includes people that are external to the tribe. But the ones that I want to, that are on this list here, some of them are here today and some are not. Lori Nesbitt is the opioid program manager. Micaiah Washington is the former outreach specialist and Yurok Wellness Village Workgroup facilitator. Jessica Carter is the director of the Yurok Tribal Court. Judge Abby Abernathy is the judge of the Yurok Tribal Court. Henry Solaris is from Yurok Planning. Daniel Norton Luna is community outreach specialist, and Anne Marie Lucas is AmeriCorps Vista worker. And the group that is on this list, they have worked together very hard on the Wellness Coalition and on the Wellness Village. And I'm just excited to have them here and participate in this webinar and to show the hard work that they've done the past year. And I think it's been longer than a year, but they just started documenting it about a year or so ago. So, okay, I think Micaiah is going to take
All right.
over the next one.
Yeah, I'm going to stop sharing, and then that way they can, Micaiah can, or whoever is going to present can. Yay. Beautiful.
I agree. Knock now, Micaiah. Greetings. My name is Micaiah Washington.
I agree, Nick now, Lori Nesbitt. I guess we can get started, and thank you for having us. And we're a little nervous here, but I think we'll get through it. So I work as the opioid program manager for the Yurok Tribal Healing into Wellness Court. I supervise case managers to support families with addiction involved in the justice and the child welfare system. Over the years, we have watched the families struggle with family reunification, relapse, and basic life skills. We've noticed that there's a vital gap between inpatient drug treatment and finding a safe place to land after returning home. To clarify, in our culture, family reunification refers to all people, and it's where the financial support drops the ball, referring to the HUD standards. In Yurok Village culture, we feel it's our responsibility to take care of our own. We give credit to Judge Abby for her vision over the last 10 years. She wanted to make this happen. While we sat in the Yurok Tribal Wellness Coalition Strategic Planning Group, the group created a mission statement, and it's as follows: to build a wellness village, which will include re-entry housing, vocational learning opportunities, childcare services, community food garden, smokehouse, and cultural activities, and regional treatment services. The group will coordinate the planning and development of the wellness village by seeking out funding sources, building partnerships, and researching similar models. That was our task in front of us. Micaiah?
Awesome. So I'm just going to spend some time today talking about the planning that went into developing this village. Although we are still in the planning process, I do want to quickly touch on the timeline. So we created a Yurok Tribe Wellness Coalition to work towards addressing the opioid and drug epidemic. We engaged in a strategic planning session last year in June of July. During that strategic planning session, it was a 3-part session, and we worked with so many different tribal leaders, community partners, to find out what are the 3 main priorities we'd like to discuss and work towards. And reentry, which is also referred to as this wellness village, was one of the main work groups that we wanted to develop. After the strategic planning session, we decided to develop a Yurok Tribe Wellness Coalition reentry group. We created a work plan. We engaged tribal departmental leaders within the tribe. We did some research about tribal village models. We consulted with the Yurok Indian Housing Authority. We communicated with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And we also wanted to learn from Lummi Nation, their housing authority in specific. Lummi is in Washington, and we reached out to them to learn a little bit more about their transitional housing program. And then we decided to actually apply for funding opportunities. And in December of 2020, we decided to change the work group name. We originally referred to the work group, the planning work group, as the reentry work group, but then we decided to really narrow down the scope and specify some of the goals and activities that we wanted to work on. And when we did that, we decided to change the name to the Yurok Wellness Village Planning Work Group. Then we decided to engage Yurok Wellness Village work group members in a 3-part brainstorming session. I will share a little bit more about the brainstorming session throughout this presentation. But then in the process of planning and conducting research, we decided that, hey, we want to learn about housing resources and services that are already available in the community so that we can share that information with clients and community members and tribal members that may need it. So then we decided to join local housing coalitions throughout the different counties as well. We also decided to integrate the Yurok Coming Home houses into the village. So the Yurok Tribe Tribal Court currently manages 2 Yurok Coming Home houses. They're sober living houses. There's a men's house and a women's house. And we wanted to integrate that into the village. So ideally, individuals residing in the Coming Home houses, working on their recovery, would be integrated into a transformational permanent housing village if they're interested in doing so. And this village model is designed to continue to support those individuals as well as their families. I know Pam mentioned earlier about bringing the families and including the families in the healing and wellness process. And that's really what this village design is. That's really what the village promotes. We did decide to engage the Yurok Tribal Environmental Program as well. We wanted to incorporate them in the work group to gain their feedback because there were certain elements that we wanted to include to promote sustainability, environmentalism, and community food sovereignty. And we can talk a little bit more about that later. And then we also wanted to learn from other Indigenous organizations that currently are building similar models or have implemented similar models. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So with this slide, we really just wanted to show a snapshot of the planning process. This document reflects the brainstorming, the 3-part brainstorming session that I mentioned earlier. In the interest of time, we will not touch on every single thing that was discussed during this planning session, but we just do want to let you all know that we discussed the eligibility criteria and populations that we wanted to target and prioritize. We talked about the structure of the village and how we plan to establish a governing body to monitor behavior, prevent relapse, help maintain sobriety, but to also build that community, that sense of community by working closely with elders. And then we also talked about some of the services that we wanted to include in the village. We want services, direct services and treatment supports to be directly embedded in this village community. I know Pam touched on similar services and the need for these services, such as life skills, financial literacy, mental health services, recovery groups, physical fitness and activities, and of course, the cultural activities that are super important to the community, such as the fishing and the gathering and traditional parenting classes, also nutrition and cooking. We talked about food sovereignty as well. And those were just some services that we discussed. We also talked about curriculums that we wanted to include, meetings, and also potential steps moving forward, and how we plan to work with clients directly. And we'll also refer back to this document if anyone has any questions as we move forward. And I will turn it back over to Lori.
You're on mute, Lori.
There we go.
There you go.
This slide is to showcase how big our community is in the terms of representation and how varied the land is. We have communities along the river, to the north, to the south, and near the ocean. So where it says in the top left-hand corner is the picture that I'm referring to, and as the North District, we have tribal members up there, but our reservation is where the yellow meets the green, and it goes up the river about 40 miles. Or the yellow meets the pink. And so our reservation is 1 mile on each side of the river, so it's about 40 miles long. So at the ocean, we have people that get salmon right out of the ocean, and mussels and clams and eels. And of course the eels and the salmon go up the river, and they change as they go up the river, and how much we can get in quantity as it goes up the river. And then the weather changes within about 5 miles from the ocean. And then of course the growing time changes as you go up the river. So this community is to time memorial. And Judge Abby says, we are all trying to plan our homes as if we designed and influenced by our local Yurok agricultural, but today. So, you know, when we used to trade and exchange food and grow with each other, that's kind of where we want to go with this. We hope to replicate that, and the Yurok tribe has 7 included in this picture. The North Districts, Rekwa, Pequon, Orig, Wichpec, and South. The image on the right is to showcase how long this work has been taking to make. The Yurok Comprehensive Master Plan was drawn up along with these designs in 2009. So it's kind of shows the legacy and saying how long we've been trying to get this going. More and more, as indigenous concepts of wellness and cultural needs are addressed in the mainstream and private funding sources, we get closer to our goal to realizing a Yurok wellness village. Maikia?
So now we want to take a moment to talk about the partnerships that we have developed as a coalition. The Yurok Tribe Wellness Coalition is the organizing hub for so many different partnerships within the tribe. There are many tribal departments, as the Yurok Tribe is one of the largest tribes in Northern California. But we've also developed partnerships externally. So referring to county partnerships such as the Department of Health and Human Services, and so many other external partners. And we really like to show this image to provide some local context using the redwood trees as an example, and how we plan to support different segments of the community, right? So before I explain this visual, I just want to provide a little bit of context. I'm not originally from Northern California. I actually moved to California from Maryland. But when I moved to California, the first thing I learned about that was very important to Yurok tribal culture was the redwood trees. I learned that redwood trees essentially rely on coastal fog and rain for moisture. I also learned that the root systems extend over 100 feet from the base, and the roots intertwine with other roots to increase stability, right? So keeping those ideas in mind, we really love to use this image to describe the coalition and how we plan to support different groups such as elders and youth and veterans and the homeless population, incarcerated individuals or formerly incarcerated individuals, and of course, families and pregnant women. We want to create a village and an environment where all these folks can grow together and heal together and walk in recovery. The coalition, again, is the organizing hub that brings the partners together. And much like how the rain and the fog and the water nourishes the trees, the partners and the different tribal departments support and nourish these families in the same way. And then we also have the different work groups that exist within the coalition. Today, we happen to focus on the reentry work group, which is also referred to as the Yurok Wellness Village Planning Work Group. But we also focus on other topics as well, such as data collection and outreach to support the families. In the interest of time, I will not go through all of the different partners involved in this process, but I do just want to acknowledge that the Yurok Tribe Wellness Coalition is the entity which brings the different service providers and partners together to coordinate the services provided to these different community members and community groups that we hope to see living in this village. So this is another image which somewhat demonstrates the goal that we have for the Yurok Wellness Village. We want this village to be community-based and family-oriented. We want there to be a place for veterans and the homeless population and persons with disabilities, units for elders and cultural leaders and mentors, so that cultural knowledge is rooted and embedded in the village environment. Also a space for families and pregnant women and children and youth, and justice involved individuals and formerly incarcerated individuals. So, Lori.
So I just want to add that the Wellness Village group is dedicated to creating a model of living and housing that is culturally rooted in the traditional village style of living, where we come together to keep the families healthy and whole so we can make care for all members of our community.
In terms of next steps for implementing this concept, we plan to continue applying for grants and funding opportunities. We plan to continue to identify ways to phase the Wellness Village construction and developing a labor force to support this initiative. We also plan to develop and establishing a tribal housing code to support the Yurok Wellness Village in connection with the Yurok Coming Home houses. And that brings us to the end of our presentation.
Thank you for having us today, and we are available for questions if you wish.
So just one last thing, the pictures they showed of and it's behind Lori's head too, on her background, it's their traditional house. That's one of the houses that they used in Yurok. And then also their logo is really awesome too. It's right in, it was in the slide I showed, and it has the importance of the water and the importance of the salmon, that helps sustain them. So they have some awesome visuals.
And I wanted to add that when you talked about in one of the slides back that you were looking for grants so that you could build these homes and create this campus, that the $1.9 billion funding that just came out, I have the analysis of all the housing money. If you want me to send that, I'll send it to Jeff and he can send it out. It'll save you some reading if you haven't already found it. And that's not tribe specific, but it's tribal community eligible. And then also I was going to share with you two things we did for funding other than Medicaid. One is at Safeport, we noticed that the parents, every time their kids got sick, would take them to the emergency room because they never learned to develop relationships with primary care. They didn't have the schedule of going to all the vaccinations and all the things they should have done. So everything went to the ER. And we started getting complaints about how expensive it was. So we went and sat down with the local hospital system and said, you know what, if you will fund us another position so that we can teach health and we can get a nurse on campus and all that, we will reduce your ER costs. And we did. And we got funding to fund a full-time nurse, and she taught classes and all the immunization schedules or all the healthy living and healthy eating and what to do if your kid has a cough and all that kind of stuff. And then we also got money from a lot of the local churches and spiritual community leaders donated money so that we could do incentives and buy car seats and do some of the things that the families needed that we couldn't afford. But I think the biggest ticket is this new money coming in from the 1.9 trillion relief bill that just passed.
Thank you for sharing that. We would definitely like to learn more about those opportunities as much as we can.
Pam, is that the American Rescue Act?
I believe it is. It's the 1.9 trillion that just passed. There's CARA is coming, and then there's a infrastructure, several trillion coming. But the first money out does include a huge amount for housing. I haven't plowed through it all myself. I just started looking at it today.
There's specific amounts for tribes too. I saw that.
Yeah. And I haven't gotten to that yet, but I can pass along the whole thing, and it's probably easier to word search it. I'll send it electronically because it's a lot of material. And then I also wanted to mention that we did something, even though we had I don't even remember what our percentage was of Indigenous clients, but it was fairly small, mostly Seminole tribe members, but we had a welcoming. Every family took turns welcoming the next family in, and they would share whatever they had. It might be a single can of soup that got split 6 ways, but that was an incredible, families helping families. I'm not going to say we didn't have there were a lot of issues with women because they did a lot of sex work. We did have a lot of fighting of, between former sex workers of different people that, I was kind of crazy. But once we got past that, they really formed very strong, nurturing relationships that they had not experienced before. So it was, and they built a meditation garden. There were some amazing things that were very self-directed, and we did self-governance. We did have the only other thing I would say is that when you open your program, or other folks that might be doing housing, probably one of the biggest challenges you may have, which you want to think through in advance, is how you handle continued drug use or relapse. That was a huge battle. And my personal belief was we don't kick people out for manifesting a chronic relapsing disease that we all know is chronic and relapsing. And there's no other health condition that kicks people out when their diabetes flares up, or they eat a donut, or they go back. But we did make it the only thing that could literally remove you. Because remember, these are people living in houses. You're not like, we're going to pull you out of your bunk bed and change the sheets for the next person. You're moving out of a house, out of a stable home. So the only thing that could get you out was if you used drugs on the campus. That was a sacred place, and we didn't want one person's use to trigger someone else's. So we said your choices stop at someone else's freedoms, and you can't do that. And we, I believe, kept the apartment open for 90 days, and they could reapply and come back in. But that's going to be tricky, how you work through when people are living in actual homes, especially if they're paying rent. In our case, they were. I'm not sure how yours will be, but policies and procedures, man, and we can always help with those. But those are very hard but important that you think through them before you open.
So one other thing I wanted to mention is that one thing that Yurok has done and excelled at is they've learned how to do that process for getting AmeriCorps workers, because Micaiah was a former AmeriCorps worker. Anne-Marie Lucas is an AmeriCorps worker now. Daniel Norton Luna he was an AmeriCorps worker. Henry Solaris was a former AmeriCorps worker. So they just they're bringing them in, and then they nurture them, and then they grow. Sometimes they stay and sometimes they go. So I think for other tribes or other organizations that want to learn that process, Lori, I've had her meet with other people to tell them about the process, because they can really help you with so much other stuff. Because I know that a lot of you tribal folks, some of you are doing 4 or 5 jobs, and it's hard to do the planning and gather the data and all that other good stuff that needs to be done. And I know Micaiah's leaving, but I've watched Micaiah and all the hard work she's done this past year to coordinate and keep this, all the big group together, because that's a big group. Sometimes, I've been at some of those meetings, and sometimes there's 35 people in that group, and she has to keep everybody moving. So not an easy task sometimes.
And I want to second that. I've had a chance, I've been in all 50 states now, and I've looked at not every housing program, but most. And I have never seen one that took such a good advantage of AmeriCorps. That's incredible what you're doing. And I wish we had thought of that and done something similar. What we did do is we refused to replicate the health and human service system that should be there for our clients ourselves, other than the substance abuse and mental health, which we just had to take it over ourselves. But what we did is we put out, we said, who in the community, whose job is it to help these individuals? Literacy, health workers, domestic violence. And we invited them to come to our campus, and we literally created an entire therapeutic schedule and life skills schedule out of existing community resources by plugging them in. They would come every week at the same time. So a lot of our groups were being run by community, and it was win-win because they got to get more numbers. They didn't have no-shows. They could come to a captive audience, do a bunch of literacy work. They got their numbers, we got the help we wanted. It was a win-win. So it wasn't AmeriCorps. I wish we had thought of that, but it is important. And I'm thrilled with the group you have on your planning committee. Those represent some key systems that will need to leverage resources when you have your village open.
They had OVC side had an awesome webinar today on sustainability.
I went to it.
It's pretty good, and anybody can have access to it because, you know, it was really well done. And they talked about that whole process of having partners involved when you're talking about sustainability and how important planning is and how important assessment is and evaluation. So I can see that Yurok Wellness Coalition is doing a lot of that stuff and a good job with doing that. And one of the questions is, this was your vision. Do you have a program yet with occupants? So I think Lori or Micaiah, do you want to answer that?
I think Lori can talk a little bit more about the coming home houses, the Yurok coming home houses. The only issue was those sober living homes tend to be a temporary transitional housing opportunity for tribal members and community members, but there's no permanent housing. I believe Judge Abby refers to it as a forever home. And when we met with some of the elders during the strategic planning process, the elders were the ones that said, we need to get back to that traditional village style of living, and something that is permanent and available for all folks, all families. So I'm sure Lori can talk a little bit more about the coming home houses and the reentry program.
Yeah, so we have a women's house separate, and then we have a men's house separate, and it's for them to land after they've gone to treatment. It's the temporary housing, and we do offer children under 10. So far, we haven't had that. Like Pam's way of they teach us new lessons every day of what the rules could be. Some of them are like testing every day, but and then you have to have somebody reinforce those rules. But aside from that, I think that they're relieved that they have someplace to come after treatment. And the forever home, that concept is back to the village settings, and I can say that we have a calling within us, whether we're an ocean person or we're an upriver person, and that village concept is, where do they want to live? So if we can create villages in all areas, that would be super, super helpful for people to feel like they're coming home. And that concept goes throughout our mind, because we're not exactly taught where we belong or have a purpose. And through addiction, I think that that's part of the fighting of fighting within ourselves. You know, why am I here? So it's a big vision, and I think it's really adaptable to people today.
So also, Lori talked about Judge Abby, and Judge Abby is like this phenomenal woman that, you know, once you meet her, you'll see how visionary she is and how committed she is to her people and to really providing true justice and equality for her people and walking the walk, you know, as a person from the community. And she went out and got her law degree and, you know, is a licensed attorney, and then came back and is doing her work as a judge and just really pushing the envelope for her people. And once you meet her, it's like, wow, this woman's just amazing. She reminds me of a native Gandhi, you know, if I had to try to describe her, because she's so smart and knowledgeable and yet very humble, you know. And when you meet her, you just want to help her because she's truly committed to the work. And she also, this whole group is committed to the work. Micaiah, Lori, Anne Marie, Daniel, Norton, Luna, you're all committed. And I have so much respect for that. Thank you.
So I could say just one of the things about the vistas is when I interview, I try to figure out who they are and what are their interests, you know, because all of us, it's not work 24/7, you know, what is our playtime? What do we like to do? And what are our skills? And what do we think we're good at? And what do we think that maybe we need a little bit of work on? So we don't have any, we have lots and lots of tasks to do in the coalition. And so I try to fit the people where they want to be, and then kind of feed little things of helping us out in other areas. So they're happy workers. They're part of the team, and not just give them a task because that needs to be done.
Right.
That is not my theory of how the you know they're they're educated and they come with lots of skills, and I appreciate every one of them every day. And I just can't say any more about what they've added to our coalition and our teams.
I did see a question in the chat box that asked, does the Safeport program still exist? The one I was covering, and very happy to say no, and that's on purpose. That our whole goal was to put ourselves out of business. We were a housing authority. We were not there to do drug treatment. We had to because of how much discrimination was happening in the community back then. And our goal was, as hard as it's going to be, to include all the children. I mean, some of them had 4, 5, 6 kids. We wanted to make sure that we did not see those kids back needing service. Now, it's easy to put ourselves out of business because we were a 2 by 5 mile island in Key West. So it was small enough that we were really able to do that. My daughter lives down there, or she just moved back, but she was living down there. And she told me a few weeks ago, Mom, it's got to start back up because now we've been down for 10 years or more. And so, you know, and opioids have now taken over, and apparently they're killing in the service industry, everybody. So that's something that's being revisited. I did want to mention that we did move on to look at another model after Safeport, because HUD is not easy to work with also. And they have a felony would be a reason not to be able to get housing. And it's crazy, you know, but we said that just means they're going to be under the bridge. We just move people around, you know, nobody wants to solve the problem. And we were here wanting to solve it. But one of the best models I've seen since then, and it was very similar to the Millennium Center that I showed you, is using standard regular apartments. You go find an apartment building with a willing person that runs it, and you say, we would like to use 5 or 10 or however many apartments in your apartment complex to create a recovery village, and that these will be rented by people in recovery. We're going to help them make application so that they can get what do you call the economic assistance and, you know, food and all of that. And we're going to rent one ourselves, and we're going to have our outpatient unit right here on campus. So these are being run all over the state of Georgia. They're absolutely incredible. And what you'll see if you walk by or go to any of them, you'll see the clients that are in the apartments. You don't know who's a client and who isn't, who's part of the general public. And you'll know the ones that are sweeping the sidewalks and picking up the trash, much to people's surprise, are the substance use clients that live there. They're so grateful to live in our case at Safeport, it was like a separate place. But when you live in regular apartments and you're not, you're sort of mainstreamed, if you will. Some families really like that, and they don't want their kids to be, oh yeah, we're at the drug campus, you know, that kind of a thing. So those models in Georgia are unbelievable. And again, run as an outpatient, because really it's what it is simulating residential by taking regular housing apartments. And you would think that the apartments would say, I don't want drug users in my apartment. And we tell them, you already have them. You know you have them because you clean up when you kick them out, and because there's holes in the wall and there's meth being made in the kitchen and all this. Yeah. You're getting them now. At least with our clients, that isn't going to happen, because we at the ones in Georgia, they go in the houses and we did this too, teach the families how to clean, like basic skills that you would think, you know, they would know, and they don't, because we remember these are multi-generations. So they never learn necessarily how to cook, how to clean. We called it self-home care. You know, we made it not drudgery, but We taught them literally or they taught each other how to do these things. And so there was never any better apartments than those that were being rented by the families that were receiving simultaneous drug treatment. So there's lots of ways to get housing, even if you don't have a budget and you don't have a campus. You can simulate it.
So I don't see any more questions.
I actually just have one question for Micaiah and Lori. Would it be all right if I shared the slides that you presented today with the attendees?
Of course, and we have, Lori, we have more information that we can provide if anyone is interested about the information for the current program for the coming home houses. We've been reviewing and fine tuning the policies and procedures and drafting them in a way so that it's closely connected to the village once we have implemented that. So
I would love to have that information. If you could forward it to Shirley, she can send it to me. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
What else was in there too was they had information about their partners, their local partners that have the youth places, you know, where the youth in the area can have some places to go. And I thought that was pretty awesome that they partner with local places. You know, they're not from the tribe, but they're external partners. And that's so important in this whole process because we need to work all together as community, you know, to help each other. And that's really awesome.
I have a question. And for either model, I'm Ed Napier, by the way, and I'm in Salt Lake City. For either model, if the participant in the program happened to also be the custodian of an elder relative, would it be okay for that elder relative to also live with them?
It was in our program. Micaiah, will it be in yours?
yeah,
Yeah.
so I'll let Lori speak to that one.
Yeah, because I said earlier that it's all people. So we're all family members, and a lot of the families have, you know, they take care of their auntie or their uncle or their cousin. That's all family members. And, you know, and I think, you know, like Pam, you know, there are some going to be restrictions, just like Pam stated before, because we have to protect the children. So, you know, there's a lot of those rules that will not have all people, but as a majority coming out of you having reunification. Because right now in our court system, because we're a public law 280 state, the counties have jurisdiction over the families, most of them, and we're having a hard time getting the mom and dads back together with the children if we don't have housing. And this establishes a housing with parameters of protection and services that are right there, because as you can see, our distance that we have to travel, the distance that we have to travel is lots of miles to do programming throughout the week. So if the services come to the people instead of them going to the services, it just makes it a whole lot easier.
Yeah.
And I'd like to add that, you know, we're talking about developing a model, a pilot, which can then be replicated throughout the tribe on different reservations. But throughout the planning process, we've had multiple conversations about prioritizing units, like a unit specifically for an elder or a cultural mentor, a unit specifically for a veteran family, specifically for a mental health or a service provider, so that those individuals live in the village and it's their home too. And there's ownership, it's a sense of community. We've also talked about also having a child care center right there in the village, and certain security features and elements. We're working on a community survey right now to find out what community members would like to see in their village, how they define a wellness village, what that means to them. What do you need to be healthy, successful, and well, spiritually, mentally, and physically. And that was something that we talked about time and time and time again. So we hope to make sure that there's a place for everyone.
I did want to add one caution. I told you about how we had the problems with the employment folks, discriminating against the clients. One other thing that was very ugly that we didn't know existed, and now I've since learned is a lot more common than we know, that when some employers know that the clientele have child welfare involvement and that if they don't complete the treatment, that they may lose their kids, many of them were forcing the women into sexual acts, like in the back room. And they would tell them, like, if you don't do so and so and so and so, then I'm going to report that you were not coming to your job, or that you weren't performing as you were supposed to, or that we're not going to be able to let you stay on. And so we ended up having to do a lot of empowerment kinds of group therapies around, and also a lot of reporting in the community of these behaviors. But we really that was the only thing we really brought in-house, was the employment part, just because of how creepy, frankly, some of these experiences were in the community. We never saw that coming. We also had one issue that was exclusionary that we didn't plan on, which was we did have somebody who was trans. It ended up being a staff member, and it was a little awkward because it was our male staff member who was running the men's groups, who identified as trans after the job, a year into his job. And that got a little bit, that was just brace yourself that everything you can possibly think you planned for will not cover everything that will happen, but it's life, and it's what you just have to deal with it, and we did find ways to deal with everything that came up, but we didn't have the planning that you have. I think what you're doing is outstanding. We kind of were thrown to the wolves out of for discrimination reasons. We cobbled this together pretty quickly.
They have
funding.
Excuse
Yeah.
me. They have a attorney working with them too. She's helping draft their policies and procedures, which to me is like really, that's one up already. Also, I attended a webinar earlier. It was on people coming back from prisons and jails and trying to get jobs in the community. There's a thing called Ban the Box. I don't know if they have it in California, but it's how employers are not supposed to ask certain questions. Like if they're real, like too general or too vague, then they're illegal. It's a violation of that Ban the Box. You might want her to have her check it out, because like Pam said, there's going to be all kinds of situations you're going to encounter that you may not be ready for, but it's good to have somebody legal that's helping you.
That is so smart, Lori, that you have an attorney. All the things you're planning is stellar. It's like no planning I've ever seen for a model that's this important. And I think I just can't wait for you to get the funding you need to make all of this come true, because you're really going about it the right way. It's really terrific. Yes, and that's a good clap to you too, Daniel, too.
Yeah.
I also want to say I'm going to send all the funding resources. I'll go ahead and put the behavioral health funding in. I just thought about, even though yours is housing that this conference is on, or this webinar, we also reviewed all the behavioral health money that's now available under the 1.9 trillion, whatever that was, Recovery Act or whatever it was called, because some of those dollars can be used to support some of these, maybe not the housing infrastructure, but the services that are provided around it. And I'm also going to send you a link. I'm going to prepare you in advance. You might want some Kleenex. I was going to show you a little video of our Safeport program. But even after I've seen it 40 times, I sob through it. And I'm like, I can't put that video clip in there. And then plus it takes about 25 minutes. And it shows you the Safeport program from beginning to end, all the way to our first graduation, and what it means to the clients and how amazing it was. And you probably won't recognize me after I've now gained 30 pounds and I'm 30 years older. But you will see in the beginning of the video, I'm touring this model with the governor's staff and the head of HUD at the time to see what this model was. That was before I wrote the grant and ended up running it. So I didn't know at the time I'm touring through that. And I was so amazed. I thought, seeing these kids in the little pools and the picnics, and it was like so family centric. It was so, you literally wanted to move in. And it was amazing that this was drug treatment. And so anyway, when I saw it's a transformational experience. I walked through there as a governor's staff and said, I can't believe I've been in the field 20 years and we didn't know treatment could look this good. And you can't go back. Any of you who open a program like this, you will never, ever deliver drug treatment in the same way. You won't be able to, because you'll see how effective it is to treat that entire family. And every member is affected, including the grandparents. Every member is affected. And they all deserve a chance at some kind of support and therapy and whatever they need. So I'll send you the link to the video, and I'll send you the funding for mental health and substance abuse and the funding for housing. And I don't know how to get that to you, Jeff, or how you'll get it to everybody here, but we'll figure that out and make sure you have that.
Also, Laurie and Makia, there's a grant that's out right now for application with SAMHSA. That's a trial opioid response grant. And I'm not sure if that might be of use to you. We've been using it for an MAT program where we're into our second year, but they just sent out another announcement. Another
one. We just received a SAMHSA grant, and then we're looking for the Youth Build grant. So we just received the COIIP grant. So yeah, it's a lot of work, and it's kind of in our department, there's 48 positions, and when I started 10 years ago, there was 7. So we've grown in the last 10 years of all the different things that we've done. And of course, this opioid outbreak, and then of course COVID smashed us. So I think we're up and running a little bit, but we've been working out of our home for a year now. So I think we got it down pat to at least continue work and meet the people on porch visits now is kind of we're getting that risky. So it's coming along.
And having peers in recovery, absolutely key. We had that before it was even a popular thing to do. And I don't know, Lori, if you or Makia know whether or not that's what you're planning, but we found that to be extremely effective.
Yeah. So we don't have a clinic ourselves. We refer to a clinic to do the treatment part. And then it's when they come back out and all those other parts of skills that has to happen outside of the doors of the clinic, it's kind of where we receive the people.
Just another hint, Laurie and Makia, you might have already done this, but sometimes, like in our case, our Department of Human Services, Division of Substance Abuse and Mental Health, our particular group is currently putting out a grant announcement specifically for youth that could help to fund like after school programs, summer programs, educational enrichment programs. That's something that you would need to contact your state Department of Human Services to see if they have anything like that. And also get in touch with your county people, because quite often they have youth substance abuse prevention grants also. I don't know if that information is of any help.
That is very helpful, and thank you so much for sharing all the resources and tips. We are open to suggestions, and we really appreciate it, because another thing that we've been talking about was challenges around internet connection and just keeping community members, especially when we're planning this village. How do we keep community members connected via, let's say, telehealth services or virtual learning, online learning, as we're transitioning into this new technological era. So that's something that we have been considering as well. And if we can streamline those services to make them available for the youth, whether it be virtually and or in person, that would just be awesome. So thank you so much for sharing that.
And if you serve the youth in the campus, one of our lessons learned, and it was very hard to find this person. Our hardest staff to fill was a sexual abuse counselor. And that's a real specific type of expertise. It's not easy to find. We were in a rural community, and 3 hours from the mainland. It was very hard to get a sexual abuse counselor, to get a good one and to keep them. And again, we just weren't prepared for how little and young, and then all the way up to the teens. But one of our young women said that she felt like a used appliance, that her mom would pimp her out or whatever when she needed more drugs. And these are things that you just want to be prepared to address therapeutically, appropriately, early. And it was rough. I mean, but the kids, that's again preventing the whole next generation. So I really admire your early focus on the children and youth.
Yeah.
I know we're cutting it close for time, but I just want to ask one more question to Pam or anyone else on the call that may have similar work being done. So Pam, for your program, was there any conversations about, I guess, law enforcement? When or how did you engage law enforcement at any point? I know for the Yurok Tribe, there's a Yurok Tribal Police department, and we've been talking about finding ways to incorporate a village protector by either having someone live in the village community that's also connected to the Yurok Tribal Police or not. We just don't know how community members would feel about that, because we don't want the village to be an area that's just full of tension, and so we are aware of concerns around law enforcement, but also want to maintain a security and protect.
So yeah, we did not go with law enforcement because of the tension between law enforcement and all of our clients, but we did go with a private security company. Again, lesson learned. This was probably year 2.5 that we figured this out. And I'm embarrassed to say, but again, we just tell the truth. We did at some point have a member of the security team make inappropriate advances to the female clients, because remember, they're paid awake all night. They're all night security. So we had to move to an all-female security staff. That was the only way we felt safe. And that was just how we chose to solve it. That might not be the best way, but that's what we did. Never had a problem after that. We did, and it was I'll tell you what failed miserably, what we call the paid awake night staff. Some of you might remember that term from the residential. I used to run residential programs back in the 80s. And you would always have to have a paid awake night staff. Well, they're the ones that always call in sick. Sometimes they're the ones that fall asleep on the job. It's like the job nobody wants, And so we finally said, too many things can happen at night to really ruin the good work that's being done here. So we hired the security company. It was a lot cheaper actually than a paid awake night staff position. And as the director, when I lived there, I helped with that, but I literally didn't sleep I was there 5 months, 2 weeks, 7 hours. And I can remember about every minute of it. I'm going to write a book about it one day. I learned the most of anything I've ever done in my life, and I miss it terribly. It was it was the most incredible treatment that I've ever seen. And I know you'll have the same experience, but it was exhausting living there, because people would just knock on my door morning, noon, and night, and I would be there. I have to go out and talk on the porch with them, and I loved every minute of it, but it was exhausting. So having and that was really valuable in the early stages when I was running it, so I could really understand what it was like, and the generational poverty, and to this day, I get so mad when people talk about, oh, they abuse, public housing to get in there. And I said, I don't know what your public housing looked like, but what I lived in was not pleasant at all. Nobody would want that unless now your place sounds lovely. We had to use existing housing built in the 60s, but I would go with I would not go with paid awake night, and I would not go with law enforcement. I would go with a private security company, vet them carefully, and use as many women as you can, just because you're going to have less risk, unless there's good visibility of your security, and then you don't have to worry as much.
Right.
So what I imagine our first site is like the background here. That's going to be the parameters. So I'm hoping that this is the kind of fencing that we have to do. So just the dangers would be inside, the people that are actually living there. So this is a big hope for me, that they find their P's and Q's and respect each other that are living in the village.
Yeah.
They're lucky to be there.
That makes sense. Y'all are so nice. I'm reading all these nice comments. And Shirley, thank you for keep pushing housing. We've kicked it around. It's been a priority of some of the grantees, and we have all these other topics. And Shirley's like, we got to get housing in there. We got to get Yurok to the table. And so
Yeah, she stays on it.
yes, she does. Yes, she
And
does.
thank goodness for her.
Thank you for your persistence, Shirley, because it
That's
sounds
right.
like this was very helpful to
You have to be.
Yeah.
Yes, you do.
So we've been hosts for a lot of tribes coming out and visiting our tribal court and seeing all our different departments. So yeah, you just gotta give us a call and come visit us, and it's kind of awesome.
Well, the other thing that's so awesome too is like when another grantee needs something, I ask Yurok and Daniel, he just shares with whatever he
They're
has.
wonderful.
Yes, I'm like so grateful.
I don't know how to
Always
do that hand,
gracious.
Daniel, but I'm giving you a hand. Thank you. A wave or whatever that thing is. Yeah.
There, Mikea has it.
Yes, thank you, Mikea. That's good.
Yeah.
Well, we so appreciate y'all staying with us, and know it's, we're a little over time now, but we really appreciate this. And Lori, you and Mikea did a phenomenal job, and Daniel, and your work on this was amazing.
Okay. Well, thank you for having us.
Thank you very much. Thank
And
you.
everybody will make sure,
Everybody.
I think Jeff will make sure you get all the stuff
GIPRA.
from today.
Please
Yeah.
do the GIPRA. Please,
Yes.
please, please, because we really do need to get our numbers up if we're going to be able to keep doing these, and to get good, accurate. If you didn't like it, please say it. Don't sugarcoat it, because we want these to be the best they can be. So, but please respond on your GIPRA.
Chimigwich means big thank you.
Big thank you to you. Thank you all.
Wow. Walk loud. Thank you for having us.
Okay. We'll
Bye,
see you
everybody.
again.
All right, bye, everybody.
No good.
Bye-bye.
On it.
And Jeff, you're muted, but did you need to say anything on the way out?
Oh no, if you could just send the resource that you mentioned to Ella, we can include it with the follow-up to all the attendees.
We'll do it right now.
Okay. Awesome.
Bye, everybody.
All right, bye-bye.